No fancy intro today because we've got a lot to talk about, so we're just going to jump right in. Integrally suppressed 9mm pistol caliber carbines have become more popular than ever. Often referred to as SD models after the original MP5-SD, these PCCs use typically around 30 ports in the barrel just forward of the chamber to bleed off energy and make supersonic ammo travel at subsonic speeds. When paired with an SD suppressor that threads over the entire barrel, you end up with a very quiet, effective, and fun package. Now, there are several options in the integrally suppressed 9mm pistol caliber carbine space, and today we're going to be comparing 4 of the most popular options. There's the new kid on the block, the Broad River Tactical CAR-15-SD, which is essentially a highly effective and customized barrel and handguard combo that's built around the awesome CMMG Banshee's radial delayed bolt carrier group. The ultra-modular short-stroke gas piston-powered Sig MPX-SD, made possible here by the user-swappable SD barrel from In Lead We Trust. The Swiss-manufactured B&T GHM9-SD, which for the purposes of this comparison will also represent the APC9-SD and the SPC9-SD, all of which are direct blowback platforms with hydraulic buffers. And finally, of course, the original and legendary roller-delayed MP5-SD, which will be represented here by the Century Arms AP5-SD that was converted by HiTec Arms. Now, all 4 of these platforms are fantastic, and if you're interested in diving deeper into any of them on their own, you can find full detailed reviews of each of these guns on my channel. And if you want to know how things like ergonomics, manual of arms, and aftermarket options compare, you're going to want to check out my ultimate 9mm PCC comparison videos, as I go into a lot of detail regarding the overall shooting experience with the non-SD variants of these very same guns there. Today, we're going to be focusing specifically on the integrally suppressed performance of each platform. So there's going to be a ton of sound samples and velocity data, followed by a long-form range session where I'll shoot them all side by side and discuss how the overall experience feels and compares. Now, I know for a lot of you, you really just want to hear how they sound side by side before anything else, so that's what we're going to start with. Now, let's discuss the parameters here. To keep things fair, all 4 guns will use the exact same suppressor setup with one exception. The B&T GHM9-SD uses its own proprietary suppressor, so there's really no getting around that, unfortunately. But the AP5-SD, CAR-15-SD, and MPX-SD will all use the CAT Mob on a Broad River Tactical SD adapter for these sound tests. In my recent review of SD suppressor options, I found the CAT Mob to have the lowest back pressure and the best tone, so we're going to use that setup on all 3 of these so that they can be as closely compared as possible. Again, with the exception of the B&T, which will use its own suppressor. Now, for these sound samples, I have 3 different camera angles with different microphone setups. We'll start off with my main camera with the nicest microphones and the most detailed sound. Then there will be a POV camera so you can get an idea of how each platform sounds from the shooter's perspective. And finally, a bystander camera, positioned about 10 feet back and a little bit to the right to give you an idea of what it would sound like to be standing near your buddies while they're shooting these guns at the range. I'll be shooting 5 rounds each with 3 different types of ammo across all platforms to give you multiple data points for comparison. We'll start off with Winchester 124 grain NATO ammo, which is pretty hot NATO spec ammo that the MP5-SD was originally designed around. Then we'll try some lower powered Blazer 124 and Blazer 115 grain ammunition to represent some cheaper, lower powered off the shelf ammo that you might be running. After we've gone through 5 shots with all 3 ammo types in all 4 platforms across all 3 camera angles, we'll briefly compare 1 shot at a time from each platform with each ammo type, first grouping them by platform, and then finally by ammo type. Lastly, while all of this is going on, I'll show you the detailed velocity data that I measured during this session, which will really help show the differences in performance between each of these platforms from a more technical perspective. Now remember, the goal of an SD gun is to use the ports in the barrel to slow supersonic ammunition down to subsonic speeds. Depending on location and climate, the speed of sound is somewhere around 1100 feet per second. So ideally, we really want to be under 1100 feet per second to keep things nice and quiet. Technically speaking, as long as it's still reliable, slower velocities will typically be considered quieter and more desirable here. So to kick things off, I want to start with a control. With the RCM barrel and the AP5-SD being 5.75 inches, the In Lead We Trust barrel and the MPX-SD being 7 inches, the Broad River Tactical CAR-15-SD barrel being 6.25 inches, and the B&T GHM9-SD barrel being only 4.33 inches, the average barrel length of this grouping comes out to about 5.83 inches. So with that in mind, I picked the Springfield Kuna as my control, which has a 6-inch barrel. So let's see what kind of velocities we're getting out of an unsuppressed 6-inch Springfield Kuna barrel without any ports bleeding off energy. Okay, cool. So we've got an average of about 1,296 feet per second with the Winchester 124 grain NATO ammo, 1,203 feet per second with the Blazer 124 ammo, and then 1,264 feet per second with the Blazer 115 ammo. Now let's see just how well these SD barrels perform at taking this supersonic ammo down to subsonic speeds and compare how they sound in the process. If at all possible, I highly recommend using some nice headphones for this comparison so you can hear as much of the detail as possible. After the clips, we'll come back and discuss the results. Let's do it. All right, there is a lot to unpack here, guys. So although all 4 platforms do significantly decrease velocity, they are clearly not all created equal. So the AP5-SD was the most consistent, dropping velocities by an average of about 257 feet per second, or around 20.53%, and reducing all 3 ammo types to comfortably subsonic speeds with extremely low power factors as well. Now, the B&T GHM9-SD was pretty much neck and neck with the AP5-SD, with an average drop of 253 feet per second, or around 20.17%. The Broad River Tactical Car-15SD was not far behind at all, with an average drop in velocity of 223 feet per second, or around 17.81%. Once again, still subsonic for all the ammunition that was tested today. Now, the elephant in the room here is the In Lead We Trust barrel with the MPX-SD, which only reduced velocities by an average of 130 feet per second, which is only 10.35% on average. That is pretty wild, guys. The only ammo that stayed subsonic here was the Blazer 124, and it was barely subsonic at that. The Blazer 115 had a slight supersonic crack, not too bad, but definitely noticeable. And the Winchester 124 NATO had a loud supersonic crack with a lot of extra back pressure and a high power factor, making it really not very comfortable to shoot in general, and certainly not without ear protection. Now, I will say, if you can find ammo that stays subsonic in the MPX-SD like this Blazer 124 does, it is a blast to shoot. It's very soft shooting, fast cycling, and it sounds great with the Cat Mob. Although it is definitely not as soft shooting as the AP5-SD and Car-15SD, partially due to their delayed actions and also because of the higher power factor for the same ammo as a result of the less effective velocity reduction performance out of this In Lead We Trust barrel. But I think for me, the winners in the sound department are definitely going to be the AP5-SD and the Car-15SD. They sound surprisingly different, but both are extremely quiet and very much hearing safe. The Car-15SD has a much slower action, so the mechanical sounds after the initial shot breaks last a little bit longer. By contrast, the action noise of the MP5-SD is a little bit higher pitched, so it could actually be perceived as being louder to the human ear, but then because it cycles faster, the mechanical aftermath of the shot doesn't stick around as long. Now, before listening to the sound samples here in my studio, strictly based on hearing these platforms compared in person, I walked away thinking that the AP5-SD was the quietest of the day. Just slightly quieter than the Car-15SD. But realistically, they are both so quiet and effective that the action noise ends up becoming a more noticeable differentiator than the report of the shot itself, which I think is very interesting. And the action of the Car-15SD by default is in the buffer tube right next to your ear, so that could be a factor too. Ultimately though, from a sound quality perspective, I think you could really flip a coin and be extremely satisfied with either one. Although I do have to say that the Car-15SD is definitely quieter with my custom lower assembly with a hydraulic buffer and A5 tube like we heard here than it is with a more standard setup, which you'll hear in a minute. Then lastly, there's the GHM9-SD. Now, the performance of this barrel is fantastic. It is neck and neck with the AP5-SD to the point of really being within a margin of error when you look at the overall averages. Where I think that B&T really falters is in using proprietary suppressors. Now, I'm not intimately familiar with all of the latest models, but I do know that many of the SD offerings from B&T over the years have utilized proprietary suppressors like this one. And while B&T does make very good quality suppressors, personally, I'm just really not a big fan of how this GHM9-SD suppressor sounds when compared against the other SD suppressors that I own. Now, this is the first generation of GHM9-SD suppressors. The GHM9-SD Gen 2 is a different style, so I can't speak on that one specifically. But with this particular suppressor, I found that there's a very prominent resonance to it that echoes across my range with every shot that I don't get with my other SD suppressors. On top of that, with the direct blowback design, there's a significant amount of port pop going on that is noticeably reduced with the delayed actions of the AP5-SD and Car-15SD, and even the gas piston of the MPX-SD. So even though the B&T is doing a great job at reducing velocity, I still tend to find it pretty uncomfortable to shoot without hearing protection. Alright, so we've covered the sound and technical performance of each platform. Let's head back to the range, shoot all 4 of these awesome guns side by side, discuss the differences in recoil and overall shooting experience, and then we'll come back and I'll discuss my final thoughts and recommendations. Alright guys, we're out on the range today, and on these barrels of fun here, I have 4 of the most popular 9mm Pistol Caliber Carbine SD platforms available on the market today. So I'm going to shoot 10 rounds with each of these platforms, starting with Winchester 9mm 124 grain NATO ammunition. It's very hot NATO spec ammunition. ammunition. And I'm going to roll back through the line and shoot Blazer 124, which is very inexpensive and very soft shooting supersonic ammunition, which again should be subsonic in these 4 platforms. So I'm going to be shooting them alphabetically by model name. So we're going to start off with the HiTec Arms converted AP5-SD. This is one of my favorite guns that I own. It is a classic. The MP5-SD is one of my all-time favorite guns, and we're using the HiTec Arms 12-inch suppressor here. Next up is going to be the Broad River Tactical Car-15-SD. We're using the Broad River Tactical SD adapter and the Cat Mob for a suppressor. And then I've got a standard carbine tube, a Springco yellow buffer spring, and a carbine buffer. This is one of the most popular ways that people are setting this platform up, so I wanted to test it like that today. Then next up, we have the B&T GHM9. This is my first SD gun that I got. It has a proprietary suppressor. It is very, very cool. Beautiful Swiss manufacturing on this guy. Very compact when collapsed as well. And then last but certainly not least, we have the Sig MPX-SD. We're using the In Lead We Trust SD barrel, Broad River Tactical SD adapter, and a Dead Air Wolfman suppressor. All right, so with all that preamble out of the way, let's get started. Let's have some fun. We're going to start off with the AP5-SD converted by HiTec Arms, and we are going to start off with some Winchester NATO 124 grain ammunition. I'm just going to kind of talk about how they feel as I go. Super quiet, which is very impressive considering that it's the NATO spec ammunition. Very, very flat shooting. Very, very soft shooting. That is incredibly pleasant. Could shoot that all day like that. Absolutely. Next up, we have the Car-15-SD using the Cat Mob. And let's run this one with some Winchester NATO. Okay, there was a little bit of a first round pop there, but still very quiet. Very, very soft shooting as well. I would say a little bit heavier recoil impulse than the MP5. Okay, and we're out. Yeah, you definitely feel the punch on that, but still impressively quiet platform. Really feels excellent and a lot of fun. All right, now let's do the B&T GHM9-SD. And then again, this one, we're starting off with the Winchester NATO 124 grain ammo. So I think there's definitely some port pop going on there. It definitely sounds like it's subsonic, but it sounds louder to me. And definitely punchier as well. Kind of a punchy tone out of the suppressor and a punchy feel to the recoil impulse, but still very, very good and very impressive again that it's getting that 124 grain NATO ammo down to subsonic speeds. So now let's try the Sig MPX with the In Lead We Trust barrel, again starting off with that Winchester 124 NATO. Woo! That is not subsonic. That is really snappy. Getting trigger slapped with that ammo, actually, believe it or not. Yeah, that's actually, of all three, that was the least enjoyable to shoot with the NATO spec ammo. Let's run through these again using Blazer 124, which is a little bit less expensive and a little bit softer shooting. All right, so we'll pick it right back up with the AP5-SD, now using Blazer 124 ammo. Let's see what this sounds like and feels like. Oh my God. That feels like nothing. That's crazy, guys. I mean, that just doesn't move. That is so pleasant shooting. That is really, really fantastic. Absolutely love that, guys. I mean, especially compared to the MPX with the NATO spec ammo, obviously completely different, but that was really fantastic. All right, so now let's do the Car-15-SD and again with the Blazer 124. So it's definitely a little bit more punch than the, sorry, getting a phone call here. Go away, spammers. So it's definitely a little bit more punch than the MP5-SD. But still extremely flat shooting, extremely soft shooting. Very, very pleasant to shoot. But that was very, very soft shooting. Very pleasant. I would say the MP5-SD was definitely softer shooting in that experiment there. Let's keep going here. So now let's look at the GHM9-SD with the Blazer 124. Okay, there was a lot of first round pop there. Definitely a lot quieter on the second one. Pretty soft shooting. Great trigger I have in this thing. I think it's an Eltman trigger. Yeah, that was pretty soft shooting. A lot of port pop though on the GHM. So in terms of comfort, I think this is the one that I would be the least comfortable shooting without ears, for sure. So definitely more port pop in this guy. And the suppressor itself just isn't as quiet as the Wolfman, the HiTec Arms, or the Cat Mob. Definitely not as effective as a suppressor, for sure. All right, now we have the MPX-SD with Blazer 124. See if we can get a little bit of redemption here since it was not subsonic with the Winchester NATO. Let's see how it does with the Blazer 124. Definitely much better. So very flat shooting. Again, a little bit of trigger slap there, which is interesting. I don't remember feeling that during my review, but maybe just compared to these other ones, it's a little bit more prevalent. But I would say very fast shooting. But in terms of the recoil impulse, I would say it would go AP5, then the Car 15, then the MPX, and then the GHM. They're all actually very soft shooting. They're all very pleasant to shoot. So we're splitting hairs here a little bit, but these are pretty expensive firearms. And I think it's important to be able to kind of hash out those differences. So that covers the 4 guns that we have on the table, but you guys know that I love a wild card round. So let's see what else I got lined up. All right, guys, you know I couldn't leave it out. I couldn't miss another opportunity to compare this setup to what we have on the table here. So this is my custom CMMG Banshee lower, which is using the Voltor A5 tube, a Tubbs flat wire spring, and the Kinshot hydraulic buffer, working beautifully with the Car 15 SD upper receiver and the Cat Mob. If you saw it in my video, I was incredibly impressed with this setup. I want to compare this directly to the AP5-SD because I think these are the 2 closest matched for the top spot here. So I really want to get a good idea of what these 2 feel like when compared directly next to one another. So we're going to reverse the order here. We're going to start off with the Car 15 SD using 10 rounds of Winchester 124 NATO. And again, with the hydraulic buffer setup, the A5 tube, this should be very soft shooting. Let's see how it feels. Oh my God. That's ridiculous. Oh my God, man. That is absolutely incredible feeling. It is so soft shooting. It almost doesn't feel real. It just doesn't even feel like it's going off practically. It's so soft in the shoulder. Let's compare that directly to the AP5-SD while it's fresh in my head and see which one feels better. Oh man, that's close. Oh man, they are really, really close with that Winchester NATO ammunition, guys. I would say that the AP5 has maybe the slightest edge. It's a longer feeling recoil impulse on the Car 15 SD with that extended tube and the hydraulic buffer, but it's incredibly soft. This feels a little bit quicker, but extremely soft as well. Like it's really hard to pick, guys. These are both very similar. So for the Blazer 124 test, I don't have enough rounds to do 10 in each. So I think I've got maybe 6 here and 8 in the Car 15. So I'm going to start with the AP5 now since I've already got it in hand. And let's see how the Blazer 124 feels. I mean, it doesn't feel like anything, guys. I mean, that is so incredibly soft shooting. But let's see how it feels in the custom Car 15 SD. Oh man, that is so soft shooting, guys. Honestly, they are so darn close. I don't know how I'm going to pick a winner, guys. I mean, these are so close. Definitely the GHM and the MPX have a sharper recoil impulse. The GHM is considerably louder with that B&T suppressor and with the port pop. But these 2, the AP5 and the Car 15, these things are so darn close, guys. I mean, if you could have either of these, you're going to have an absolute blast. Everybody on the range is going to love them, guaranteed. All right, guys, last test. I'm going to do 5 rounds of Winchester 124 NATO rapid fire, back to back, no talking, between the AP5-SD and the Car 15 SD. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to start with the AP5-SD. Again, 5 rounds, rapid fire, Winchester 124 NATO.
Okay, so with NATO ammo, the MP5 is softer, but the Car 15 is just as pleasant. It's just different. I think there's just a little bit less felt recoil with the AP5-SD, but the recoil with the Car 15 and the A5 buffer is so soft. I would say it's a toss-up. They're both amazing.
All right, guys, that was a ton of fun, and I hope you found the live range experience valuable. All 4 of these guns are just so much fun to shoot, so I really had a great time comparing them side by side like this. So with all that said, what are my final thoughts? Now, in addition to the range day that you saw here, I continued shooting and comparing these guns off camera over the course of the past several months, and this is where I'm going to land here. It is honestly very close, but to me, the winner of the day is the AP5-SD. It has the lowest recoil, the least muzzle movement. It's essentially tied for the quietest, although it's worth noting that in my notes from the filming day, I felt that the AP5-SD was the quietest behind the gun, so there's that. And it also has the most consistent SD barrel performance. Now, coming in at a very close second is the Car 15-SD, which is extremely close in felt recoil to the AP5-SD, especially with that custom Banshee lower. It has the second lowest muzzle movement, is nearly tied for the quietest, and the SD barrel performance is excellent. And it also has the advantage of more modern ergonomics and controls over something like the AP5-SD, and a ton of versatility when it comes to tuning. Now, third and fourth place was actually very tough to call, guys. On the one hand, the B&T barrel is nearly tied with the AP5-SD's RCM barrel, and so it has excellent performance when it comes to velocity reduction, which absolutely crushes the In Lead We Trust MPX-SD barrel. But then, since it's direct blowback, it also has the most felt recoil, even though it's still very pleasant, and it definitely has the most port pop. Now, between the port pop and the decidedly underwhelming performance of the proprietary suppressor, this is the only gun of the day that I really dislike shooting without hearing protection. Even with the excellent velocity reduction, the resonance of this B&T suppressor can make my ears ring. It's also possible that the shorter 4.33-inch barrel is a factor as well. Maybe there's a bit of an incomplete powder burn going on when compared to other slightly longer SD barrels. Or maybe it's the port pop. Either way, whatever it is, I really don't like shooting the GHM9 without ear protection. Now, on the other hand, while the MPX is one of my absolute favorite 9mm pistol caliber carbines that I've ever shot, this In Lead We Trust SD barrel is very disappointing from a velocity performance perspective. And that's really the main thing that an SD gun is supposed to do. So in all reality, I think that means I kind of have to put it in last place, unfortunately, since it really fails to achieve its primary goal of consistently making supersonic ammo travel at subsonic speeds. That being said, if you can find ammo that runs well and stays subsonic, then this is a very easy third place spot for me, especially when you factor in the price. All right, so what are my recommendations? In what types of situations would I recommend each of these platforms? If you want the absolute best, it is very hard to beat the MP5-SD in any quality variant, like this AP5-SD converted by HiTec Arms, for example. It has the lowest recoil impulse and muzzle movement. It's essentially tied for being the quietest. It has the best SD barrel performance, and it's literally the original SD design. It's got all the nostalgia, all the cool factor, and all the performance, but very likely at the highest cost, depending on how you build it. Now, if you already have an MPX and a 9mm capable suppressor, the In Lead We Trust barrel and a Broad River Tactical SD adapter can get you up and running for very low money comparatively. And with the right ammo and suppressor combination, you're going to have a great experience. Though admittedly, it's not going to be quite as effective overall as the rest of the pack here. You could also maybe look into the Ronin Arms SD barrels. Maybe those would perform better. I haven't tried them personally, and I'm not sure if they even sell them separately outside of the services they provide. The one thing I will say is that if you really want an integrally suppressed SD firearm and you don't already have an MPX, I would probably stay away from this one, honestly. If you have to buy a brand new MPX on top of the SD barrel and the suppressor, I really just don't think the value is there for me personally. But if you already have an MPX and you love it, completely different story, absolutely worth giving it a shot if you want to try an SD firearm. And you get to take advantage of the superior modularity of the MPX platform too, so that's pretty cool. Now, if you don't have anything currently and you love the idea of an SD firearm, the Car 15-SD is probably the easiest thing to recommend. For just a little bit more than the MPX-SD barrel, you can get a much better performing platform that you can throw on any existing or new AR pistol or SBR lower, with much more customization and tuning available, and arguably the best ergonomics of the day since we're ultimately talking about an AR platform here. For a fraction of the price of an AP5-SD fully converted, you can easily get 90 to 95% of the overall performance with the Car15SD and with a lot more versatility as well. In my opinion, the Car15SD is hands down the best value in SD firearms right now. And what's really wild is not only is it the best value, but it's so close to just being the best at everything that I had to go back and forth several times just to figure it out. It really is that good, guys. And then lastly, we have the B&Ts, and I would really only recommend the B&T offerings like the GHM9-SD, the APC9-SD, or the SPC9-SD if you just absolutely love the brand or design, which is totally fair and valid. Out of the box, they are way more expensive than the rest of the options we discussed today, and they just really aren't the best at anything. They do have a slick modern design and modern controls and that beautiful Swiss manufacturing everybody always talks about, but with blowback operation that increases the prevalence of port pop, and then a proprietary suppressor that's really just okay, and less customization options compared to any of the other options here, they end up being quite a bit harder to recommend for me. Even though the B&T barrel is one of the best when it comes to reducing velocities consistently and ultimately doing what an SD firearm is supposed to do extremely well, for all the other reasons we discussed here, it's definitely the last one that I'm going to be reaching for on any given day, personally. So that wraps up my comparison of some of the most popular integrally suppressed 9mm SD Pistol Caliber Carbines, guys. This series has been a ton of fun for me to produce, and I really hope you enjoyed the ride as well. Let me know which one of these platforms is your favorite down in the comments below. So that's going to be all for today, guys. I've got a ton of reviews on the way, including more PCCs, ARs, AKs, handguns, and shotguns. So remember to like and subscribe, ring the bell, stay tuned, and thanks for stopping by.